Shabbat shalom, everybody. This is Rav Shmuel, Rashbi, as I like to call myself, Rav Shmuel ben Yehoshua, Rabbi Stephen, with this week's 10-minute Torah. Glasses on, glasses off. I don't know. Sometimes it's tough. I put the glasses on, and sometimes you can see the reflection, so it may be distracting. So take it off a little bit. So this week's portion, Vayakhel, we're going to talk about how everybody comes together to help build the Mishkan, which is like our synagogue. I know I've said this before, but isn't it interesting how a lot of some of these parshas talk about not just the commandments, the mitzvot to build the Mishkan, the portable temple that Israel took with them on their travelings in the wilderness, but also the furniture and all the other things, how they donated their jewelry, how they donated their time, and it's such a similarity to what we have today. You know, the way people pitch in and help with their synagogue and participate, and we have about three or four parshas where it describes that. That's a lot. That's a lot. Um, so we talk about participation. In our synagogue right now, I have been teaching people Hebrew and forcing them, to some folks' chagrin, to come up to the bima during Saturday morning services and be gabbaim. Now, the English translation of the word gabbai is officer. And these are people that stand around the bima. And while the Baal Kriya, who is the person who is reading directly from the Torah, is reading, it is their job, if you will, or their role, maybe that's a better word, to make sure that the person reading from directly from the Torah, the Baal Kriya, is perfect. Yes, perfect in their reading. And when we stumble upon a word or mispronounce it, then it's up to them to correct that. Now, it's been said that it can be a very daunting task to be up there in front of everybody and reading. It's kind of tough. Some people get intimidated at having the responsibility of checking the reading of the Baal Kriya. Now, my feeling is this. When I was a kid, and maybe some of you also had the experience, we had very, very capable rabbis. I know we did, who was a Talmudic rabbi. Shapiro was a Talmudic scholar, and he just went right through it. And some people can read, especially those people who are Israeli or have an incredible knowledge of Hebrew. They can go right through it and read it quick. My thinking as a rabbi, and like it says on my certificate, rabbi and teacher, that's what I am. I'm a teacher. So I see it as my role as a rabbi to empower people, especially in the ways of Judaism. So I go slower, and that way people who are maybe not as adept can help go through it. And I call more people up there. This is a way of empowering people. It's also a way, folks, of continuing this whole learning. We've talked about this before. When I was young, I went to Hebrew school 3 times a week, Tuesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, Sunday morning. That's how one of the ways I got so adept at knowing Judaism and knowing the prayers and the melodies. And today, what do we do at our synagogue? We have kids online for 90 minutes with a 10-minute break. That's I mean, it's doing a little bit, doing what we can do now, but conservative Judaism is not as demanding, or we don't have as much going on as we did. Now, maybe in other parts of the country, it's a little different. We have a small synagogue, but it is what it is. So the idea is to get people capable of doing things. Look at let's segue into this particular portion before I start going on and ranting more, okay? So, what happens in this portion? People contribute. They contribute their goods. All right. So it's a stark contrast to the idea of the golden calf, where people who were freaking out because Moses didn't come back when they thought he should be back, and Aaron's trying to buy time. And he's like, all right, give me your gold and your earrings. We'll melt it down and we'll make this representative. That's what he had in his mind. Not a God really, but kind of a representative, because people are like, who are we gonna lead now? People say, why didn't Aaron just said, well, come on, guys, I'm pretty capable too. I can lead you. But Moses is going to be down. People didn't buy it, right? So they willingly gave over all their valuable possessions. Well, now that we're starting to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, people are doing the same thing. They're giving over so much that some sages say they overgave. They gave more than was needed. Now, the interpretation of that, or the analysis by some of the sages, and as usual, it's two different camps, is that however much they contributed was just enough. It was one of those miracle things. A more down to earth, let's call it that. Explanation might be that whatever was extra left over, they just hung on to it in case they needed repairs because, you're spending what's going to be 39 years in the desert, moving around, picking it up, putting it down. There's going to have to be some wear and tear, right? So you need material to be able to repair some of this stuff, right? But the idea is that people got very excited about this. It's like, wow, we're starting a heritage. We're at the forefront of this wonderful idea that there's one God that controls everything. We don't have to be worrying about a God for the wind, a God for the sun, a God for the moon, a God for the harvest, a God for the planting. It drives you crazy. You look at the Greeks and the Romans, and we talk about the gods, the pantheon of gods that they had. You had Jupiter, who was the king of the gods, right? You had Saturn, who was his father or something, or father-in-law. You had Hera, who was his wife. You had Ares, the god of war. You had Mercury. You had all these gods. And what's really interesting is that these were just the gods that they all had in common. Every community had those gods, and they had all these other gods. It was enough to drive you nuts, right? So, I mean, if for no other reason, having just the one God, it's like, oh, good. We're going to do an offering just to the one God. It's all we have to worry about, right? But the bottom line, too, is that Hashem is God, King of Kings, right? That's it. And it's God that controls everything, and it's God that's speaking to Moses, in a manner of speaking, of course, and directing Moses to say, okay, we're going to lay out this whole process of worship. And the idea of worship is not that God is some big hungry being that needs burnt offerings and thanksgiving offerings. And, if you sin, you better burn a sheep or else you're going to be in trouble. It's a way of bringing you back. It's a whole new concept, in worship. Instead of appeasing these forces of nature, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. The idea is that it brings you closer to the creator of the universe. And that's what this is really all about, to show you the dedication and love that people had. Some of you know that one of my quirks is I like to quote movies. There was a movie a few years ago. You might remember it, Back to School. Rodney Dangerfield, he's this kid's father. The kid's struggling in college. Rodney Dangerfield is like, hey, I'll go back to school. I'll do it with you. And thus ensues, a nice comedy. But at one point, he's sitting in this one class. It's a business class. And the teacher, played by Paxton Whitehead, English guy, very, very classy, says, we're going to create a business. We're going to build a warehouse. We're going to do it from the ground up. And when you think about it, this is kind of like that. We're going to create a heritage. We're going to create, I hate to use the word religion, even though we are religion, but for me, Judaism is a lot more than that. It's a heritage, it's a culture, it's a legacy. And we're going to build it, and we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to build this beautiful tabernacle with everything overlaid in gold and and beautiful wood. And you look at synagogues, you've got stained glass windows with the tribes on it. You've got these beautiful chairs, these pews, these beautiful books. It's pride. That's what it is, folks. It's pride. And we see that pride in this and also the next Parsha as well, Vayakhel. And the way people just came out and just donated and they contributed and they did what they could do. They learned trades because they've been slaves, right? They're their trades were basically lifting up and carrying. That's what they did in Egypt for 100 years. But now they're learning trades. They're learning to sew and to put things together with the primitive tools that they had. And you think about the dedication and the work that went into doing this, and it's just absolutely wonderful and amazing. So let that be an inspiration for us as we go forward, as we look at our ancestors and look at the love and the kavod and the honor that they wanted to pay Hashem and themselves and future generations. And let's use that as our inspiration. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, happy Purim. We got Passover coming up. We got the reading of the Omer. We've got the listening of the Omer. We have Shavuot, the giving of the Ten Commandments. Very exciting for our spring, what I like to call the spring high holidays. Shabbat Shalom, and as usual, thank you for listening.